In 2023, protests erupted across Japan. Some said they felt angry and confused why the government just won't listen to its people. People showed up with signs, making it obvious they were frustrated by the state's choice, insisting that the sea doesn't just belong to the Japanese government, it belongs to the world. Japanese fishermen weren't thrilled either. They were worried about serious reputational risks and losing profits since their livelihood, the sea creatures, could be affected. They still remember what happened over a dozen years ago. Back then, their catch's value plummeted, and it had only just started to recover. And now this. And of course, neighboring countries are quick to criticize. Russia and China are entirely opposed to Japan's actions. One Chinese official even said he considers it selfish and irresponsible. So what's going on there? Japan's actually decided to dump all the contents of those tanks right into the ocean. Fukushima Daiichi. To get a sense of what these barrels are, we'll rewind to the previous decade, right back to its beginning, the year 2011. About 140 miles north of Tokyo, in the Fukushima prefecture, stands one of Japan's first nuclear power plants, Fukushima Daiichi. 6 reactors operated there, generating a total of 4.7 gigawatts, making it one of the world's 25 largest nuclear power plants. And then on March 11th, 2011, an earthquake struck. Japan's seismic situation certainly doesn't make such a natural phenomenon anything out of the ordinary, but this time the ground shook like never before. It was the most powerful earthquake in the country's history, with a magnitude between 9 and 9.1. You can clearly see how much it stood out on this map. The dot is several times larger than any of the others. Honestly, hardly anything was prepared for this. That included the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant. After the tremors, the active reactors automatically shut down, and the high-voltage equipment and power lines were destroyed, causing a total loss of external power, which triggered the diesel generators. It seemed like the plant had held up, but since the strongest tremors were out at sea, a tsunami followed soon after. About 40 minutes later, the first wave arrived, reaching a height of 13 feet. And then came a second, towering 46 to 49 feet high, far above the protective seawall that was only built to handle waves up to 18 feet. Naturally, a lot of equipment was damaged or completely destroyed. 3 reactors were also destroyed, causing the fuel inside them to melt, and all of that had to be constantly cooled. For that, tons of water were delivered to the plant after the accident. It was used to bring down the temperature. Naturally, after coming into contact with the radioactive fuel, the water became contaminated. So in Japan, they decided that they'd need to build tanks and store the dangerous water in them. Tanks. As of 2024, the number of tanks has reached a staggering 1,046 units. That's, let's just say, a whole lot. Well, the video clearly shows the entire area around Fukushima Daiichi is totally crammed. To understand just how much water is currently stored in these tanks, here's a simple fact. It's equivalent to 500 Olympic swimming pools. And to put it another way, the station holds 343 trillion gallons of water. That's a whole lot. For example, here's what the station looked like before the accident, and here are the latest shots. You can see the difference with the naked eye. And all of this needs to go somewhere because the earthquake that caused the nuclear power plant accident is far from the last one. Japan is a country that's constantly hit by nature's attacks, leading to the destruction of various scales. So all the contaminated water could seep into the ground, and from there, tracing its path becomes almost impossible. The consequences will be dire. Plus, no one is safe from leaks that can happen while taking care of all these tanks. Yeah, they need maintenance. You didn't think you could just set up these tanks and they'd keep water forever, did you? Everything has an expiration date. That's exactly why the Japanese, specifically Tokyo Electric Power Company, which oversees everything going on at the plant, had to figure out where to dump all this water. As you might have guessed, the company decided that all this polluted water needs to be dumped into the ocean. But not just poured out near the shore, it needs to be released farther out. How? They'll need a tunnel. In fact, building such a path for radioactive water is quite tricky. It clearly took a lot of effort, money, and time. The total length of the tunnel came out to about 0.6 miles, and the final discharge point sits 39 feet deep. Plus, of course, they had to add necessary extras like valves to stop the discharge in case of an emergency, as well as covers to keep sand from getting inside. In the end, everything went fine. As of August 2024, the Tokyo Electric Power Company has released 16,500 gallons of water into the ocean, all within a year from August 2023. But the tanks aren't being cleared out yet. Some won't be emptied until January 2025. And by the end of March 2026, 21 tanks of radioactive water will be dismantled. Processing system. So it turns out that Japan just decided to go against everyone and dump thousands of tons of radioactive water into the ocean? Well, of course not. The Japanese have a plan. First of all, before it goes into the tanks, the used water goes through thorough treatment in a system called the Advanced Liquid Processing System, or ALPS. This is a complex combination of filters and other elements. First, the water undergoes preliminary treatment through iron co-precipitation. This removes alpha nuclides and organics. Then it goes through carbonate co-precipitation. This is how alkaline earth metals, including strontium, are removed. After that, the water passes through 16 absorption columns to get rid of nuclides. Thanks to their combined effort, 62 hazardous elements are removed from the water. At the very least, this is necessary to avoid seriously polluting the world's oceans. What does the International Atomic Energy Agency think about this? Well, it keeps an eye on the global agreement from 1993. According to it, dumping radioactive waste into the seas and oceans was banned. The discharges are still happening, but since the amount of contaminated water is small, the world's oceans are doing just fine. The agreement includes a strict ban, mainly limiting the discharge of highly active substances, but as for the low-level ones, countries still have the right to dump them. And Japan follows this requirement. The treatment system removes everything that poses a significant danger and leaves tritium. Hold on, they actually leave tritium? You can hardly call it an element that's safe to just pour in the world's oceans. This radioactive isotope of hydrogen can replace regular hydrogen in our cells and emit beta radiation that damages internal organs. Scientists have found that tritium damages the genetic material in cells, causing our body's particles to age rapidly, thin out, and throw our metabolism off balance. Plus, many experts believe that tritium-laden water is a major factor behind the rise of cancer in German, French, and American kids living near nuclear power plants. The good news is that most of the tritium is expelled from the body quickly, within about 10 days, but the bad news is that around a quarter of the isotopes stick around for a long time, constantly emitting radiation. However, the International Atomic Energy Agency believes that in low concentrations, the element doesn't pose a serious danger. That's why in Japan, they're doing something obvious with the radioactive water. They're diluting it with seawater before releasing it into the ocean. And they dilute it a lot. The ratio is 1 to 40. So for every 1 ton of contaminated water, they need 40 tons of seawater. Risks. Yes, the Japanese purify contaminated water to the point where it's so clean that the IAEA has no objections, and the Japanese government isn't trying to stop this way of getting rid of huge amounts of dangerous tanks. However, people and many countries are still against it. Why? First off, it's worth mentioning that even diluted tritium dumped into the ocean can easily reach some pretty unexpected places. The contaminated water isn't just going to stay put. There are plenty of underwater currents. And the most dangerous part in the case of the Fukushima Daiichi is the Kuroshio current. It can carry radionuclides from the shores of Japan all the way to California. By the way, about the sunny American coast, one study that was actively conducted after the Fukushima Daiichi disaster found out that bluefin tuna carried radionuclides to the shores of San Diego within 6 months of the 2011 incident. So long-distance migrating animals are also a big concern for many people and experts. Phytoplankton's also been affected. These free-floating organisms are the foundation of the food chain for all marine life. Yes, these tiny creatures can also absorb radionuclides from wastewater, and since plankton are eaten by pretty much everything, dangerous elements can accumulate in various invertebrates, fish, and marine mammals. And then in humans, because many people people love to eat seafood. Besides this, there's another study that unambiguously identifies microplastics as an additional carrier of tritium. And as we know from millions and billions of other studies, plastic in the world's oceans is only increasing. So this transfer of harmful elements from Fukushima is also seriously worrying a lot of people. Take a look at these maps. It's clear to see how the shores of Japan and the nearby coastlines are one of the largest hotspots for microplastics in the entire ocean. Also, the memory of what happened after the Fukushima Daiichi accident is still fresh in the minds of the Japanese. Let's start with something unexpected, like butterflies. What do they have to do with Fukushima and the radiation leaks? Well, in 2012, not long after the disaster, scientists found that butterflies in the area had mutated legs, antennae, and wings. Further research showed that in areas with higher radiation levels, butterflies had much smaller wings and unevenly developed eyes. Before this fascinating discovery, experts thought insects were really resistant to radiation. Mutant butterflies? That's scary. It's no surprise that this still freaks out the Japanese, even though the materials released back then won't spill into the ocean. As for the fish, it was also contaminated. High levels of cesium-134 were found in local aquatic life. Remember those fishermen who were against dumping radioactive water? Well, the events of 2011 bring back bad memories. Fishing was practically wiped out then. How could it have been different when other countries began to just fear buying seafood from Japanese fishermen? Well, it's not like the problem has disappeared. Maybe it's just less severe now? In 2023, researchers studied fish living near nuclear power plants. It had 180 times the concentration of cesium allowed in Japan. And in the black rockfish caught nearby, they found 9,000 becquerels per pound, while the maximum level is only 50 becquerels per pound. What's more, this isn't an isolated case. From 2022 to 2023, 44 fish were caught with cesium levels above the norm. In addition to all this, in 2023, reports came out that 4 people working at the station were exposed to radiation. They were cleaning the pipes in the filtration system when the hose accidentally came loose. Water splashed on the workers, and then after being taken to the hospital, it was found that their radiation levels were at 4 becquerels. That's above the safe limit. What do the experts say? We talked a lot today about the downsides of dumping wastewater into the ocean, but are there any upsides to it? First of all, it's worth mentioning that the IAEA is actively testing everything that comes out of Fukushima Daiichi. In 2023, 3 organizations, in collaboration with 4 national laboratories, participated in a study of the water treated by the Alps purification system. As a result, it was found that 52 of 53 test results matched what was claimed. As for the one test that didn't pass, the Korea Institute of Nuclear Safety questioned the suitability of the water for release into the ocean. So the takeaway was, everything's good, but the purification system could use a bit of tweaking. It was also found that the radioactivity of tritium in purified waters measured at 148,900 becquerels per 0.3 gallons. That sounds like a lot, but the president of the Korea Institute of Atomic Energy reassures us, in 2021, tritium levels in the water were at 620,000 becquerels per 0.3 gallons, so there's a significant decrease. Meanwhile, later that same year, the IAEA even stated that the concentration of tritium in the discharged water is well below the operational maximum. This view is shared by Tony Hooker, a nuclear energy expert from the University of Adelaide. Some data suggest that the purification system and seawater dilution worked so well that the level dropped to as low as 190 becquerels per 0.3 gallons. To understand how small this value is, you can use the banana equivalent. It's pretty popular in the scientific community. Bananas are rich in potassium, and potassium-40 is radioactive. So a single 5-ounce banana emits about 19 becquerels. So if bananas fell from Fukushima Daiichi along with the water, there would only be about 10 of them. If the levels seem high, regardless of banana comparisons, here's an interesting fact. Tritium has always existed in the ocean, even before Fukushima. Right now, the Pacific Ocean already contains 18 pounds of pure tritium, and Japan will only be releasing 0.002 ounces each year. It started showing up in the water back during nuclear bomb tests in the last century, and now it's coming in steady streams from operating nuclear power plants. In fact, it's coming in way higher amounts than what the Japanese station puts out. For example, the Yangjiang nuclear power plant in China releases about 112 terabecquerels each year, while its South Korean counterparts put out 49. The wastewater from Fukushima, according to the plan of its creators, will release 22 terabecquerels a year, which is significantly lower. Well, here's another point that experts use to argue that we shouldn't be afraid of the Fukushima nuclear power plant's discharges. We consume tritiated water every day. In small doses, sure, but we take it in, yet nothing happens to us. Therefore, the releases from Fukushima won't have any effect on humans.